My Riz are skibbity. My Ohio is gyat.
I'm Mac Chista, host of this stupid show, and tonight we're reviewing Ridley Scott's Napoleon. Napoleon is about Napoleon, and goes through most of his life from the French Revolution, his rise to power during its troubled aftermath, various military and political shenanigans, and his eventual fall from power. Also prominent is his romantic pursuits with his wife, Josephine, which is often strained as she fails to produce an heir for the Bonaparte dynasty. Now let me just quick get this out of the way. The movie starts with like 2 minutes of logos. Look, say what you want about cinema sins, but I'm beginning to see their side of things. And then it actually starts, you're watching it, you're thinking, alright, let's watch this thing, and then it stops again to list off the actors that are playing. Like, give it a rest, can I please just watch a damn movie? With that out of the way, let's actually unpack this thing. Before I go off on Napoleon, here's what I like. The film's at its best when you just kind of look at it. It really nails that 17th, 18th century aesthetic. The architecture, the decor, the clothing of the wealthy and lower class, the uniforms on the soldiers were especially a delight to see. The visuals do a great job of setting the time period, and it would make for a pretty immersive viewing experience. The battle scenes are equally great. They feel grand in scale, they're terrifically done. I think they recreate the brutality of musket warfare very well, and if nothing else, it's a good change of pace from your typical action scenes in cinema. Musket warfare just isn't done very often these days, so it's refreshing to see. That being said, I'm not a big fan of the gradient they use. You know what I'm talking about. This dark, gritty, medieval filter they put over it to make it look more depressing for some reason. I don't want that. I want to see the world as its inhabitants would have actually seen it. And I guess that's a good segue into the historical accuracy of the movie. Ridley Scott's Napoleon has gotten criticized a lot for its historical inaccuracies. And yeah, pretty much anything that happens here has to be taken with a grain of salt. Napoleon attending Marie Antoinette's execution never happened. Holes being blasted into a giant lake to drown a bunch of Austrian soldiers, French propaganda. Moscow getting set on fire after Napoleon occupies the city, not true. It was raised well before he got there. People dunk on those scenes and more, and I don't blame them. That being said, I think the whole debate depends on what you want out of this film. If you want something that has the history all down to a T, you're just not gonna get it. If you're willing to look at it as a bit of artistic reinterpretation of events, I think an argument can be made for it. Hell, Elvis went down that route, and frankly, that movie is goated. That being said, there are historical inaccuracies that are just plain dumb. Just look at this picture. I don't care how artistic you're being, this is just stupid. I, for one, am willing to look past some of these historical inaccuracies to some extent. The real problem is that Napoleon's career and everything surrounding it is a complex subject indeed. We're talking more than 25 years of politics and wars, with a lot of important people taking part in it. All of this changing the course of history as we know it. Some people might say, there's no way a 2-hour, 45-minute long movie can make that work. And they'd be right. It's not really fair to say that this is a film that depicts Napoleon's career. It would be more accurate to say that it focuses on the highlights. In fact, I'd go even further to say that it narrows it down to the highlight of the highlights of his career. The movie skips a lot of events, often for years at a time, so not every aspect of Napoleon is brought to the big screen. Take, for example, the disastrous Peninsular War in Spain, which is completely absent for its showing. It's really obvious that the movie's having trouble cramming all this content in, because it allows itself no time to breathe. It's just this happened, this happened, this happened, checking things off the list as fast as possible. And you're only given a very basic idea as to why anything happens too. The context and background for a lot of the historical events are drastically simplified to the point where it's actually kind of misleading. It lessens the impact of the battle scenes, for instance. When so much context is missing from these battles, when it's oversimplified to such a degree, it's harder to feel the weight of them. The movie's limited time is not really helped by this whole Josephine subplot. A good chunk of it is set aside to focus on Napoleon's marriage with his wife, Josephine Bonaparte. Because obviously, when you have all this politicking and war going on, clearly what the audience really wants to see is marital disputes in between. It doesn't really add anything to the film. It just overextends something that's already spread too thin. If you wanted to make a movie about Napoleon's career, make a movie about Napoleon's career. If you want to make a movie about the relationship between Napoleon and Josephine, make a movie about the relationship between Napoleon and Josephine. Trying to do both in such a short window of time just makes it all feel cluttered. When the movie finishes, you don't really get an idea of what Napoleon did, other than he became Emperor of France, he won a few battles, then he got exiled to some island in Africa. It doesn't do him or his period justice. Overall, for what they were trying to do, this isn't really something I can see being a movie. I could see it working as a series of movies with each installment focusing on a specific part of Napoleon's life or career, allowing important events to be concentrated and expressed with more detail. Maybe instead of a movie, have a multi-season season TV show on a streaming service or something. Because when you have to sacrifice so much to make something like this work, it's just not worth it. Much of the acting isn't much to write home about. It's perfectly acceptable across the board, except for Joaquin Phoenix. You know, the guy who plays the name on the title. Good God, this guy sucked. I'm not the first one to mention this, but a lot of scenes feature Napoleon when he would have been in his 20s and 30s. Then you have Joaquin Phoenix playing this guy with his wrinkly skin and droopy eyes and decomposing face. Like, I don't want to be rude, but you're old, pal. You're old and you're playing young and it doesn't work. And his voice just does not do it for me. He sounds really unimposing, dare I say, effeminate.
But I follow in the footsteps of Alexander the Great and Caesar.
I'd at least appreciate an accent to get me into the character. Even if you can look past that, the portrayal of Napoleon is still the most offensive thing about the movie. He's consistently depicted as awkward and childlike. He comes off as really uncharismatic, very inelegant and stiff. It makes scenes where he engages in diplomacy with other world leaders really hard to take seriously because he's just so weird. There is a moment in the movie, and I swear I'm not making this up, Napoleon's talking to this British diplomat guy, and he screams in a fit of rage. He actually says this, "You guys think you're so great because you have boats!" Which, I won't lie, was pretty funny. Except does that really sound like something Napoleon would say in a diplomatic dispute with one of the most powerful countries in the world? The scene showing the relationship between Napoleon and Josephine only compounds this issue. It's where he seems to be the most childish, unstable, and submissive. Hell, it's in those very scenes where the movie will just make things up, like Napoleon throwing hands with his wife during their divorce proceedings. Never happened, no reason for it being there, but it is anyways. That's the funny thing about this whole romance subplot thing. It doesn't really add anything to the movie, it just serves as another opportunity to make Napoleon look ridiculous and silly and bad. While we're on the subject of the whole Napoleon and Josephine deal, what the hell is up with those sex scenes? Yes, there are sex scenes in the movie, I don't know why, and they look really dumb. Like, they're doing it with clothes on, and they look like they're dry humping or something. It looks weird, it looks silly, but that's all I'm gonna say about it. If I had to sum up what it was like to watch Napoleon, it would be as such. Joaquin thought he was doing a sequel to that Joker movie, and he just didn't question why everyone was wearing 18th, 19th century military uniforms. There you go. You really don't get the idea that you're watching one of the greatest leaders of all time doing his thing, getting it done, taking onions away from Austrians. You feel like you're watching a parody, a poorly done one at that. I'm not even sure if Joaquin genuinely did a bad job of acting as many people say that he did. I think that was just the direction he was given. I don't think the director, Ridley Scott, actually likes Napoleon, and if I had anything to say about it, I'd guess he probably wanted to make a movie where Napoleon was deliberately portrayed in a negative light so that audiences would in turn view Napoleon negatively. Now, if Mr. Scott wanted to make a movie to get people to feel one way or the other about Napoleon, I'd be fine with that. After all, movies are arguably at their best when you can reflect on them and take something away from the experience. This film doesn't do that. The thing is, you still have to depict the person you're going after in a relatively fair manner. When you go out of your way, out of the realm of reason and possibility to make him look stupid and bad, to the point where you just make stuff up at points, I have no choice but to dismiss your entire work, because it's not an accurate depiction. But hey, I wasn't there, so I guess I should shut the fuck up. Over-ambition put up against a short runtime, oversimplification of complicated events, subplots that serve only to clutter the movie, and a director who clearly had no intention of actually doing the period justice due to his own biases. I give Ridley Scott's Napoleon a 4 out of 10. Recommendations? Not really. Napoleon really has nothing to offer to the viewer, and the viewer has nothing to take from it. Paired with the fact that it's coming to Apple TV, I mean, let's just be real here. Who's out here with a subscription to Apple TV? Oh, well, Mac, I'll just pirate it, I hear you say. Hey, man, go for it. I mean, you're watching me right now, so clearly you don't hold your time in very high regard. That's gonna be all for our Napoleon review. Now, if you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. You've just watched a video from the Jedivision. If you want to keep up to date with our game and movie reviews, subscribe to the channel, follow the Twitter, and join the Discord. Mac Cheese to Jedivision, signing out.